Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Taking the Money from the Pentagon to the People. We are really excited that you joined Will and Juan this afternoon for the presentation, and we're very excited to hear from our panelists, Representative Melissa Sargent, Miriam Pemberton, and Judith LeBlanc. My name is Udzi Lokiwa, and I am the Senior Program Associate here at WAND, and I'll be running the back end of the technology today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. All attendees will be muted during the presentation. Please submit your questions for our presenters by typing them into the question section of your panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. Those questions will come to me, and I'll ask them aloud to our presenters after they finish. If you're having any technical difficulties, please contact GoToWebinar support directly, and their phone number is 1-800-263-6317. And now I'm going to turn it over to Senator Nan Orrock, the President of the Women Legislators Lobby. Senator Orrock?
Thank you, Udzi, for throwing out the welcome mat. I'm Nan Orrock, and I'm with you today from our WAND Will office in Atlanta. So glad to welcome everyone on the phone call, and looking forward to having a robust discussion on a topic that may be new to many of you, and that is how to work on transition assistance for defense-dependent communities. We phrased it a little more popularly, moving money from the Pentagon to the people. But we're going to have the opportunity today to hear both from a legislator on the ground in Wisconsin who is going to share the initiative that they're taking there, as well as hearing from some very talented folks who work organizing and researching on this topic, and get ourselves up to speed on where this issue is moving forward in states, and have each of us who are on this call that are elected and serving in general assemblies or senates at our state level to look at whether we can begin to embrace this work and bring the energy into our states to assist in the process to look at how to move our economy away from a defense-dependent economy to a state and local economy that is robust and engaged on the domestic side with education, health care, infrastructure, and meeting the needs of our folks. Let me move ahead to first. I will introduce our three presenters today, and each of them will bring their remarks, and we'll have time for discussion when we conclude. And we really want to encourage people to jot down your questions as you listen to the presenters, and be ready with some good probing inquiry, as well as any comments that you'd like to make about what situation you're facing in your state or in your community. Moving right ahead, again, we welcome all of you, and the Women Legislator Lobby is a robust network of legislators across the country, and this webinar will be available to people online in perpetuity, we would like to think. Representative Melissa Sargent, Miriam Pemberton, and Judith LeBlanc are our panelists. We'll hear first from Representative Melissa Sargent, then followed by Miriam Pemberton, and wrap up with Judith LeBlanc. Representative Sargent has been wonderfully active in Madison, Wisconsin. She's a member of the General Assembly there and is a native of that state, and in fact a native of Madison, and received her entire education there as a small business owner and a policymaker who has been very active at the community level before she took her seat in the Wisconsin State Assembly. She's served down on the local level with the elementary school PTA leadership, been very involved on environmental issues that Wisconsinites are facing, as well as business alliance and environmental alliances that number in the dozens, it almost seems. She was a founding member of a group that worked meeting the needs of homeless, unaccompanied youth, and she's served on the County Board of Supervisors. Very rich background that she brings, and she chaired the Dane County Health and Human Needs Committee, so she's keenly aware of both what the folks across her state and in her community are wanting and needing, and also the challenges of juggling a public budget to meet the needs of the community. So she brought all of this talent and perspective with an 83% take of the vote last November, and has been representing Madison and Maple Bluff since then, since she was sworn in January. And she serves also on committees that are very pertinent to our conversation: the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee, Financial Institutions Committee, the Small Business Development Committee, International Trade and Commerce Committee, and the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. So she is off to a fast clip, and we're so pleased, Representative Sargent, that you could step out of your national conference. I know you are engaged on many fronts, and we're so pleased that you have gotten involved in this issue and are moving forward on it, and are going to update us on what you see for Madison and for Wisconsin. And then let's go ahead and take some questions that people might have for you before you have to step back into your conference, if that works for you. So we'll move ahead, and let me introduce Representative Melissa Sargent, and I will introduce our other two after Representative Sargent speaks, to give her adequate time before she has to step back in her conference.
I think we might have lost Representative Sargent. Senator Orrock, why don't you go ahead and introduce our other two presenters, and when Representative Sargent gets back on, we'll let her go ahead and do her presentation.
Thank you, Udzi. That sounds great. Yes, our two other presenters bring a wealth of background and knowledge on this issue, and a long lifetime commitments of working for national priorities that don't blow all of our wealth on Pentagon spending that's bloated and way out of line with what would be realistic and necessary. Miriam Pemberton, a research fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, has focused on the military budget and transition assistance for defense-dependent communities for some time. She was the director formerly of the National Commission for Economic Conversion and Disarmament to look at ways and means for defense transition after the Cold War wrapped up in the late 80s. And Miriam, as well, has led a task force for about 8 years that worked and produced every year an approach to the federal budget in a way that met all our needs. That was called the Unified Security Budget for the United States, and we've been very familiar with that, Miriam, and have made great use of it. She co-chairs the Budget Priorities Working Group, and that's a place where nonprofits, NGOs, are working together on military spending issues and sharing information and strategies. So with her PhD from the University of Michigan and her long years of attention to this issue, we couldn't be happier to have her with us today to give us an overview and drill down on this. She'll be followed by Judith LeBlanc. Judith is with Peace Action as a field director, and she works with 35 affiliates across the country, almost 100,000 members in that network, to support the organizing of a grassroots movement for a demilitarized U.S. foreign policy. What a grand idea. May that day hasten and come. Judith coordinates Peace Action's Move the Money campaign. That's an effort to organize grassroots coalitions of community, labor, and peace groups to change the national spending priorities. And she's worked on a national level for 3 decades or more on an array of campaigns around labor rights, racial justice, disarmament campaigns, and co-chaired the United for Peace and Justice National Coalition that worked to oppose the war in Iraq. We're so happy to have her with us. She's a member of the Caddo tribe of Oklahoma and hails from Harlem, New York. So looking forward to hearing from both of those fabulous presenters and their wealth of information. And we'll check back now with Representative Melissa Sargent.
Representative Sargent, are you on the line? All right. Well, I think while we're waiting for her to join us, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Miriam Pemberton to do her presentation. Miriam?
Yes. Thanks so much. And thank you so much, Nan, and to Wanda and Will for organizing this. This is, as you can tell, very close to my heart. I think we've got a really important historic opportunity here, and we can't blow it. So we all want to move from, we want to move money from the Pentagon to the people. But we know that there will be economic dislocation in the process of doing so. And so we have to take care of the transition from one to another. And that's what this session is all about. I understand there's a bit of a delay in the slides coming up for everyone, and so I'm going to just try to remember to pause between them. So defense transition assistance, what is it? Well, we are winding down 2 wars, and the defense budget is declining, in part driven by the defense side of the sequestration process. And as we know, communities and workers and businesses are beginning to be affected. But the way sequestration in particular is structured, 2014 is when the real hit is going to take place. And so those affected communities and workers and businesses need help to make the transition to new civilian work. And state legislators need specific strategies to show that they understand the need, that their support for cutting the Pentagon doesn't mean that they're indifferent to the needs of the defense-dependent communities, workers, and businesses in their districts, and that they know how to help. So basically, the Program for Defense Transition Assistance has 4 basic parts. And the first is the one that you all do, and that Wand will helps you do, which is advocating the resource shift, the shift from making things we don't need, having the Pentagon make weapon systems we don't need, into taking that money and having us make things that we do need. So you all know about that one. The second piece is advocating for a set of federal programs that are useful for this defense transition, and I'll talk about those in a second. But I really want to focus on the third and fourth of these parts of defense transition assistance today. And the first is pushing legislation that creates state commissions that are charged with coming up with diversification plans for defense-dependent state economies. And the other one is helping defense-dependent communities access federal resources to plan a transition to new economic activities. These, as I say, are absolutely tailor-made for state legislators, and they're the ones that I think we need to focus on most. So the first of these state commissions. Connecticut has taken the lead in this effort. Back in May, the legislature passed an act concerning the Commission on Connecticut's Future, it was called. This is kind of a vague charge, but front and center in the charge to this commission is that it's supposed to come up with a plan for diversifying Connecticut's really defense-dependent economy. It's already met, and it's got to report its findings by the end of next year. The membership, I won't go through it all. They're all there. But suffice it to say that it's very broad-based, and it's interesting that it includes a representative from a peace organization and an environmental organization, as well as strong participation from organized labor, as well as representatives of the prime contractors and the small subcontractors. And its mission includes broadly a plan for the restoration and growth of manufacturing in Connecticut, and the coordination of economic development policy with capital investment. And then here comes diversification or conversion of defense-related industries. And they put a special emphasis on encouraging environmentally sustainable and civilian product manufacturing. And in addition to producing this report, the Commission is supposed to evaluate legislation that's related to the defense economy in the state and prepare short and long-term strategies to help businesses in this part of the economy to modify production for non-defense applications. So as we all know, commissions can be a total waste of time. They can be just a process where people get together, they talk a lot, they produce a report, and that's the end of it. So I was getting a little concerned that might be happening in Connecticut, and so I wrote a memo suggesting some measures that this Connecticut Commission could take to really make it more likely that it would come up with a plan that would actually be implemented and that would actually accomplish something. I'd be glad to share that memo with anybody who's interested. So I talked about examining Connecticut's past diversification experiences in the post-Cold War period, consulting representative defense firms on what their plans are to diversify in the downsizing and what help they need, taking testimony from particular experts on manufacturing and defense diversification, accessing federal resources, and focusing on the most promising initiatives for regional economic development. In the case of Connecticut, I mentioned particularly, offshore wind as a focus of what Connecticut's economic development planning is, and the idea that the Commission needs to figure out how to connect this defense diversification mission with the clean energy and transportation initiatives that are ongoing in the state. So that's the commission that is actually up and running now, but I wanted to mention one other. In my home state of Maryland, their bill has been drafted. It's sort of modeled after the Connecticut bill with some differences. I talked yesterday to the state Senate sponsor of the bill, who is the chair of the Budget and Tax Committee, and he's really terrific and really wants to push this. And so the bill is on track to be introduced in the next session, beginning in January. And then here are the dates and information about the staffing. And it's likewise a very broad coalition, including the president of the state AFL-CIO that is very much supporting this proposal. And there are some differences that you can read there in the representation, but it's quite similar to what's going on to the framework that was developed in Connecticut. I think I won't go through all of these specific parts of the mandate for the Maryland Commission, but you can read about them later. And if this commission fulfills this mission, it will be a really strong blueprint for Maryland, which is, like Connecticut, one of the most defense-dependent states in the country. So now I want to focus very briefly on the other tool that state legislators can promote and work on. This is facilitating local transition planning. This is another way to respond to the charge that if you advocate Pentagon cuts, you're abandoning the communities and workers that are dependent on Pentagon contracts in your districts. You can say, no, we need this transition. However, there are federal resources available for communities that are going to be needing to go through this transition. And in addition to these transition planning grants, there's technical assistance. This is offered by, it's actually in the Pentagon, but it has nothing to do with the military mission. This is the Office of Economic Adjustment, and its only mission is to help communities affected by defense downsizing, either from base closings or defense industry contract losses. And so, that, as I say, they give these transition planning grants and technical assistance to help defense-dependent communities develop alternative economic activities. So who is eligible for these grants? They are available to local communities or to regions or to states. And the threshold for eligibility is very low. You only have to show that about 2 to 3% of your workforce is employed in the defense industry to qualify. And it's public officials who take the lead in securing these funds. They form planning groups funded by these federal funds involving economic development professionals and community worker and business stakeholders to undertake transition planning. And some of these, this is a bipartisan effort. There's, for example, Lima, Ohio, very strong Republican state. In Lima, they make almost all the tanks, some that the Pentagon doesn't even want. But Lima has, with the help of Senator Portman, a Republican, has gotten one of these planning grants. They want to keep making tanks, but they understand that they really need a plan B. And so this is their vehicle for doing it, and wanting to build those tanks and coming up with a plan B, they realize are not mutually exclusive strategies. And so this is a change from a couple of years ago. Now, it used to be that to qualify for one of these grants, you had to have undergone a significant contract cancellation. Now that's not true. Any community that has this small threshold of defense dependency and wants to do some transition planning can get one of these grants. They are non-competitive grants. So I'm making a big pitch. I would love to work with any of you to help you get one of these grants. And I see two reasons why it's really important to do this. First, to give concrete help to communities, workers, and businesses in your districts to cope with this historic change. And second, to really take the lead in building models showing other communities across the country that there's life after defense contracting. I think I won't, I'm not sure how my time is doing. I'm afraid I'm running out of it. So I won't go through all of these. I just want to say that this Office of Economic Adjustment in the Pentagon is designated by the Obama administration as the sort of point of contact and gateway for a range of other assistance that's available from other federal agencies. And so making contact with OEA, with the Office of Economic Adjustment first, is the way that you can then get implementation funds that are available from all these different federal agencies. So these are the two tools, the two new tools, state commissions and these federal federally funded local transition planning grants. These are important ways that state legislators can facilitate a transition to a peace economy. Thanks a lot.
All right, well, thank you so much, Miriam. That was really, really helpful. And before we turn it over to Judith, I'm going to see if Representative Sargent was able to join us. Representative Sargent, are you on the line? Okay, I'm not sure. I think she wasn't quite able to join us, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Judith LeBlanc. Judith? Let's see. Judith, are you on the line? I think we may have lost Judith. Let's see. And Representative Sargent, are you on the line? Okay. Well, while we're waiting for our presenters to get back on the phone, I think I'm going to turn over to Senator Orrock and see if she wants to talk a little bit more about what WAND is doing on this effort. Senator Orrock?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Miriam. That was just quite clear and helpful. And these two new elements that's come online, that is this commission approach.
I'm sorry, Senator Orrock?
Yes.
I think I figured out how to unmute.
Oh, good. Oh, great, Judith. Is that you?
Yes.
Well, we have your smiling face up on our screen, so we'd love to hear your lilting voice to go with it. What a relief.
Well, I have to say that I'm very excited to be working with WAND and Will and to be on this webinar. So excited I dumped a cup of green tea on my computer. But I'm plowing ahead, figured out how to unmute. And really, the reason why we're very excited, Peace Action and Institute for Policy Studies and other groups who are working on this project of moving the money from the Pentagon to the people, is that really working with WAND and Will and working with you, state legislators, we have the potential for having real power in changing the direction of local economies. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the strategies for how we can build community support for your efforts in state capitals across the country. State legislators working hand in hand with the stakeholders to find proactive solutions to problems that we face in our communities. And the key problem is being able to maintain and develop sustainable, good-paying manufacturing jobs. Who are the stakeholders? Well, it's the workers, the families of the workers, and the communities in which we all live. It's the unions that represent the workers. It's local electeds. It's the business community, big and small business. It's community groups, it's peace groups, and environmental groups. Why? Because, as my grandma always said, troubles are everybody's business. When there's trouble, it's everybody's business. And national spending priorities are very out of whack. When you have 57% going to the Pentagon and new weapons and wars, and you have education, transportation, and other services our states depend on, getting single digit every year, not right, not logical. So troubles are everybody's business. So we need to change the national spending priorities and move that money to the people. And it requires starting locally, and that's why the state legislation strategy of establishing state commissions that can do the planning, that can help business and labor and community come up with plans to transition from depending on wars and weapons for good-paying jobs to an economy that is producing goods for civilian use. Miriam outlined what's possible in some of the experiences in Connecticut and Maryland. But what is really necessary, and what can we do to help you do the job that you need to do in the state capitals? Well, what we want to do is to build public engagement to support your legislative efforts to introduce and pass state bills that can create these commissions to start the planning that's necessary. I want to get specific, to tell you a little bit more about Connecticut and Wisconsin. You've heard a little bit about Maryland, and if you want to see some detailed information about Maryland, go to ourfunds.org. ourfunds.org, and you'll see the coalition there that Peace Action helped to initiate. Labor Community Coalition lays out their plans. We have soon some steps being taken in Ohio and New Hampshire, and we're hoping other states. But right now I want to drill down on Connecticut. Senator Tony Hawk, one of your leaders, worked hand in hand with the AFL-CIO, the Machinists Union, to get this bill introduced and to build support for it in the legislature and get it passed, lobbying, pressure from below. Truth is that some in the legislature wanted to knock out participation in this state commission of peace and environmental groups, but they were roundly defeated because legislatures knew that they needed kind of the full array of folks who've been concerned about the distorted national spending priorities and the outsized chunk that the Pentagon and wars take from our yearly federal spending. So you've got to have all the stakeholders around the table to prepare for the future of sustainable local economies. In Wisconsin, I do hope that Representative Sargent is able to get on the phone, because they've begun to draft their bill, and we've begun to have planning meetings with a number of the stakeholders to initiate local listening sessions to build support for the idea of the bill, even before it's introduced. They're working in a somewhat hostile environment. The legislature and the governor have not necessarily seen the importance of the role of organized labor, as we know from the Wisconsin struggles of the past 2 years. But what Representative Sargent and Senator Tony Lena Taylor, another one of your leaders, believe is that jobs, good manufacturing jobs in our community is not a partisan issue. It's a bipartisan. It's really a community survival issue. So what we're doing in Wisconsin is, before they even introduce the bill, we are helping them prepare these listening sessions by National Priorities Project and Peace Action coming in to do a statewide training of labor and community, environmental, and peace leaders, so that they can organize these listening sessions in various electoral districts to talk about, number one, what is the federal budget process, and to follow the tax dollar from your paycheck to Congress and back down to the state legislature and then back into our community, so that when people participate in the listening sessions and bring testimony and bring their opinions, they'll be conversant in what we're dealing with on the national level and how we need to build support for a state commission to help map out the transition from dependency on defense contracts to good, sustainable manufacturing jobs. We want to use the trainings that we're doing in Wisconsin to build capacity. When constituents are more informed, they can build critical political pressure for the passage of not only a bill to form a state commission, to transition the local economy, to make plans to transition that local economy, but for ongoing struggles that go on to meet the people's needs in the various legislative battles. So the strategy that we're pursuing in Wisconsin, that was pursued in Connecticut, and now in Connecticut, we are beginning to build for local hearings. The commission that's been established will be conducting local hearings around the state. National Priorities Project and Peace Action, again, there we're providing training for statewide leaders to mobilize their constituents to participate in these hearings, so that we can build grassroots momentum and help this commission do its work in Connecticut. So the strategy for grassroots organizing and participation that we're pursuing, number one, in each state where legislators are interested in introducing a bill to establish a commission, then we want to help bring together all of the stakeholders. We want to find ways to support the organizing, bring local groups together to support the idea of establishing a commission. Number two, building out and working with support from the labor movement, from community groups, peace and environmental groups. Without that kind of level of grassroots organizing and coalition building, your work is lonely. Your work might not be successful, but even more importantly, the creativity and the ideas that can come from bringing small and big business together, local community leaders, faith-based groups, community groups that deal with housing, we can raise the voices of those who will be affected, not only by the cuts in the Pentagon budget, but affected by our ability to build a movement from coast to coast that moves the money from the Pentagon to the people. And so Peace Action and the National Priorities Project and the Institute for Policy Studies, we stand ready to help you in building a local infrastructure to support your work, to work with you in developing the work around reaching out to the Office of Economic Adjustment. But we also are hoping that we'll be able to develop the ties from state to state that will put maximum pressure on Congress in the longer run to change these national spending priorities. So I really appreciate the time that you're spending considering some of these ideas and approaches, and we stand ready to help you in your states.
Thank you so much, Judith, and thank you, Miriam. It looks like, unfortunately, Representative Sargent was unable to join us, so we apologize, but we'll let you know how to get in touch with Representative Sargent if you have specific questions for her. And now we would like to take your questions and kind of open it up for some question and discussion. And just to remind everyone, if you have questions for Judith or for Miriam, please type them in using the question panel. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen. Those questions will come to me, and then I will ask them out loud. So I'm just going to go ahead and get us started with our first question. And it's a question for Miriam. Miriam, you talked about the potential for these state commissions to be either robust or, unfortunately, anemic. Can you share a bit more on approaches that can best ensure that the commission stimulates action steps rather than just meeting endlessly or prematurely adjourning without any solid results?
Yeah, that's a great question. And with the Maryland Commission, we tried to write in that they would be meeting monthly because the Connecticut Commission said, you know, in the minutes of their first meeting, well, we should probably meet before the end of the year, and then we should meet a few times next year, and then we should write a report. And so that's what got me worried. And so we tried to work that into the Maryland bill that there would be monthly meetings in addition to public hearings. But I was told, you know, that's not the way commissions work. So if it's possible to you know, write in a certain number of meetings, I think that's one way to you know, make it more likely that this is going to be a serious process. Because to really come up with a set of action steps that will really be you know, become incorporated in you know, the state's economic development plan and its you know, its implementation of that plan, you know, it can't be done in a couple of meetings. You know, a couple of meetings, you know, you can talk a lot, but it's really, if you're gonna do this well, it's going to take some work. Now, as I say, the Maryland sponsor of the legislation said, you know, commissions, they'll meet as often as they decide to meet. You know, it's not something that you can put in the legislation, but it seems like it's worth trying. Then, you know, as I say, I would be glad to, as individual legislators move forward with this process, I'd be glad to share my recommendations for the kinds of investigations that that will need to be undertaken if these plans are really going to be serious. So, I recommended bringing in, there's something called the Alliance for American Manufacturing, and they, this guy, the head of this organization, that's his whole focus, and the whole focus of that organization is on strategies for reviving manufacturing. He's really a smart guy, and so I recommended him along with several other experts, the experts who actually looked at were around during the post-Cold War period. There was back in the early 90s, the Commerce Department had an Office of Economic Conversion Information, and the director of that organization is a friend, and he works with communities on economic development planning. So I recommended, that and he's willing to consult with communities that are undertaking this process. I could go on and on, but I guess I'd just underscore Judith's point that, as we say, sunshine is the best disinfectant. If these commissions meet behind closed doors, they're less likely to come up with a serious plan than if kinds of coalitions that Judith was talking about are developed to really open these up and really make sure that that the public knows what's being done, and it kind of holds these commission members feet to the fire and demand that they come up with a plan that is really feasible and practical and makes use of all of the federal resources that are available to support it.
Thank you, Miriam. For our next question, oh yes, go ahead, Judith.
I would just add, Miriam brings up that there's some technical things you might want to include when you draft your bill about hearings and what kind of experts to bring together, and of course the composition of the commission. But I just want to emphasize that this is about a political campaign. In Maryland and in Connecticut, for example, the AFL-CIO at their state conventions passed resolutions in support of the work of this commission. In Connecticut, the Machinist Union, which is one of the largest unions in the state, and of course has a very big political action committee and does a lot of lobbying, they are proposing to the commission straight from the beginning that these public hearings be held because it puts the wind in the sails of the legislators and the members of this commission, including the business community. And I can't emphasize enough that getting the key stakeholders, labor and community and peace and environmental groups together as you plan the introduction of this bill will guarantee that you'll have some wind at your back. And that's I think, the best guarantee for making sure that these commissions do their work.
Thank you, Judith. All right, I think we'll take our next question. Oh, this is a good one. When we talk about the amount of money wasted by defense spending to constituents and to the media, it can be really easy to get lost in statistics and all the details. So how do we discuss this legislation and this campaign with constituents to win popular support and bring public attention to the issue in the media?
Maybe I'll just start by saying that I think one of the problems, and we've been, the National Priorities Project, which is a fantastic research organization that is partnered with Peace Action. They do analysis of the federal budget. Their website is wonderful. You can put your county or your city in, and you can find out. It's an interactive website. You can find out how much money you're paying for any given line item in the federal budget. But one of the problems we're finding in our work and doing the trainings around the country is that even those who do active lobbying to prevent cuts to food stamps and that kind of thing on the congressional level, they know very little about the about the distorted spending priorities that exist, that 57% of annual discretionary spending goes to the Pentagon, and that the Pentagon budget has doubled in the last 10 years. And so I think the most important thing is to put an emphasis in the public eye about what are the national spending priorities, how do they affect our communities, and how, given the process that's underway of cuts under sequestration, of the impact of the ending of the wars, therefore, what can we do to make sure that people who've been working for defense contractors are taken care of, that the communities are taken care of, and that we have a plan so that we don't need to be dependent on wars for good-paying jobs. I think that frame is the one that we're finding is the best way to kind of engage people in the conversation where they do have to, at some point, tangle with those statistics.
I agree with all of that, and I guess I'd just add that the virtue of this frame of defense transition assistance is that you're not attacking someone's livelihood if they're working with Pentagon contracts. You're simply saying this change is coming. These wars are ending, and the defense budget has doubled in the last decade, and there is waste in that budget, and we can't afford to waste all this money. We need to put it into making things that our country actually needs. And I guess the one statistic that I find, in addition to the ones that Judith has mentioned, just resonates very well, is to invoke a study done at the University of Massachusetts, showing that $1 billion put into the Pentagon generates about 11,000 jobs. If you put it into clean energy, it generates about 17,000 jobs. If you put it into education, it generates about 26,000 jobs. So, military spending, like every form of federal spending, creates jobs, but it's really a poorer job creator than all of these other ways we could be using our federal dollars. And so, putting money into the civilian side of the budget will create far more jobs than we currently have.
Thank you both. So our next question, I think, is probably one for Miriam, and it's, do you have any insight into how the federal planning grants are being accessed and utilized? And did you indicate that you can offer further assistance on approaches to securing one of those grants?
Yes, I can. And also I put together a page of resources with links to the Office of Economic Adjustment sites that explain the criteria for applying for these grants. So I think it will be possible for the organizers to circulate this to the participants in this call, after the webinar is over. The other thing I'll say is that so I met with the head of this Defense Industry Adjustment Program at this Office of Economic Adjustment at the Pentagon, and he made it clear that the administration wants to put more money into this. They really want this process to work, and they see it as a way to create this transition so that our budget can be invested in the kinds of things that the administration really does want to fund. They, as I say, have made the grants non-competitive. That is, if you qualify and they help you fill out the forms, they will write you a check. They are expecting to ramp up this program, and they are looking for for applicants, and so it is kind of ripe for the picking here. And yes, I would be very happy to to sort of make those contacts and help people get put in touch with the right people at this office and facilitate in any way I can.
Great, thank you, Miriam. We appreciate that. I'm not sure if maybe Judith or Miriam, which of you wants to take this question, but so who are the most likely opponents of defense transition? Have you observed them in action, and are there any patterns or sort of insider intel that you could share for folks that are interested in taking this on in their states?
Judith, I don't know. Do you want me to? I can just start, I guess.
Sure.
I mean, the opponents are, probably pretty easy to identify. They are contractors who want to keep doing what they're doing, who want to keep the Pentagon gravy train, ever expanding. And yet, I will say, this isn't, just a left liberal project. I invoked Senator Portman, a Republican of Ohio, who facilitated one of these grants for Lima, Ohio, a very defense-dependent community that realized, it needed to come up with a plan B. So while, the usual opponents are going to be out there, I would say from the evidence so far, this is not, this is not a left liberal project. It is. It's very possible to work in bipartisan fashion, and you don't have to even, it can be disengaged from advocacy for Pentagon cuts. You can simply say, whatever you think about Pentagon spending, this spending is coming down. These communities are vulnerable, and they need to figure out another way. And that's sort of a non-ideological way you could spin this, and to give it very broad support. It doesn't mean you are trying to take Pentagon contracts out from under these communities. You're simply saying, these cuts are coming. You're vulnerable, and there's, rather than sticking your head in the sand or doing nothing but lobbying for more Pentagon contracts, you can do both. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can do what you can to preserve your contracts at the same time that you are coming up with a plan for what happens if the contracts go away. So there are all sorts of ways to spin this in a challenging political environment. It has the potential to really appeal across the spectrum because job creation is something everybody can get behind.
And I would add, because Miriam is so right, jobs, it's not a, it's a bipartisan issue. It's a community survival issue at this point. And the opponents tend to be those who typically oppose the rightful role that the government on all levels should play in making our country a better place and making our communities safe and secure and in helping people live decent lives. So those tend to be those who oppose the idea of the government playing a role in transitioning. And the truth is, wars created jobs. In Wisconsin, in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, over 3,000 workers were laid off this year. Why? Because their contract ended producing armored vehicles that have been used in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's really interesting that the Connecticut machinists, they're concerned because they've been there, they did that. The machinists, which has a very high concentration of machinists and defense contracts in Connecticut, they realized that you can't just depend on wars for good jobs. And within their union, they are doing work among people who might not necessarily support the idea of the commission and this kind of diversification. They're doing work within their union to try to figure out and to come up from their life experiences in these big production plants, what could these companies produce for civilian use? And it's kind of like Back to the Future. I know when Miriam was working back in the 1990s, the machinists union, when the Pentagon budget was cut by 25%, the machinists union and all these big production plants used to meet every week with the management to talk about ideas for what else they could produce. And it's kind of Back to the Future. That's the kind of thing that needs to happen now, because there will be many naysayers, good-hearted naysayers say, well, we've been producing, engines for planes, supply planes for these wars. What are we going to produce otherwise? And it's really got to come from the local electeds and small business and big business and the workers themselves to figure out what kinds of things could be produced and make a profit and keep their jobs.
Well, thank you to Judith and to Miriam. This has been a really, really great presentation. I think very helpful for everyone on the line. And thank you to everybody who took the time to join us this afternoon. We really, really appreciate it. And again, if you have specific questions for Representative Sargent, we'll be sure to let you know how to get in contact with her. And of course, we'll let you know how to connect with Miriam and Judith as well. Before we let you go, just wanted to let you all know that we will be having a 3-part social media webinar series starting December 5th at 3 p.m. The next 2 parts of the series will take place December 12th and December 19th. So if you have questions about social media and how to apply social media to getting the word out about defense transition, for example, that will be a good series for you to take. So December 5th, December 12th, and December 19th, all at 3 p.m. Please keep an eye on your email. We'll be sending you a follow-up survey as well as the recording to this webinar and more information about defense transition. Again, thank you to our presenters, and thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon. And with that, we will wrap up.